Hey everyone, welcome to Culturally Prescribed. My name's Daniel.
I'm Robert.
And today we're going to be kind of winging it. We were talking a little bit off camera about sports, and we thought, why don't we just talk about sports injuries? It's something interesting, something that I like to get into, so does Robert. We're going to just delve into that, have a quick chat about that.
All right. Please stay tuned. Hopefully you guys like the video. So there's a big thing going on right now, right? There's a big tournament that's happening in the world that we Americans don't really know about.
I think it's gaining popularity. You're talking about the Euros. It's the 2020 Euros technically, but obviously postponed because of COVID. Okay. But it's basically the championship for all the European nations that qualified.
For what sport exactly?
For soccer.
For soccer. Okay.
And yeah, just helping Robert understand the way soccer works.
Okay.
Because it's a bit confusing how club teams are and international teams are. And I think that's an area where I try to talk to my American friends that trips them up a little bit.
Okay.
Is how people be like, wait, can't Manchester United play Brazil or something like that? And to me, I'm like,
so let's break that down.
Yeah.
So how does this work? You have different teams from different countries or different cities or what?
I guess all of them. So each nation has their domestic league. Let's say in England, the top tier is the Premier League, and you got things like Manchester United, Man City, Chelsea. It's some of the teams most Americans are probably familiar with.
Yeah.
But then in Spain, you got Barcelona, Real Madrid, teams like that. And then beyond that, you can have international tournaments where it's the club teams playing each other. The most famous one being the Champions League. So you got all the top teams in Europe playing each other, club teams.
Okay.
It's like Chelsea versus Barcelona or something like that.
All right.
But then beyond that, you've got the actual international games, which are nations playing each other. Let's say Brazil, England, Germany, teams like that. And then on that sphere, you got continental tournaments, so the Euros right now as well. You've got Copa America, which is the South American version. Yeah.
So that makes so in America we have let's say we have football, right? Where we have the NFL and the National Football League, and they are a non-profit, and they right, interesting.
Bass is taking the piss.
And so they have the within the NFL, you have teams that are represented by cities, and each one of these teams is kind of its own kind of company. And you have a person who owns the team, and then you have a bunch of people who coach and support the team itself. It sounds like it's different when you said different leagues or different conferences. I'm not sure how that works. And you said club teams are different from national teams, things like that. So.
So I guess just to back it up, because it's kind of confusing, it's so different how things are here. We don't really do conferences or anything.
No.
You've got each nation has their own domestic leagues. So in England, there's several tiers of soccer. Okay. So there's the Premier League, which is the top one, then Championship, which is basically Division 2.
Okay.
And then League 1 is Division 3, just to make things more confusing.
Okay.
And League 4 is the 4th division, and there's 10 tiers.
And these are different teams within these different leagues, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so what's the team from the Premier League?
That's a Chelsea.
Chelsea. Okay, so Chelsea's in the Premier League. Does Chelsea play other teams in other leagues, or?
If you qualify for European tournament.
Okay, and so it's a club.
So clubs are basically what you'd imagine NFL teams or NBA teams being this is the business, I guess. You could describe it that way. And they can buy whoever they want. You're not restricted by nationality. Chelsea's got a bunch of players from different countries, same thing like Man United or Barcelona, etc.
I see. You have different types of, conference, so you said not conference, but leagues that are either based on your nationality, or you have a different club that's based on how popular or how skilled you are, and that's kind of more of a business trading. And you have just these different kind of circles where you play within this circle, or you can play within this larger circle, and sometimes these circles overlap. But for the most part, that there's a big business that is involved in soccer, particularly worldwide.
Yeah, exactly. It's I guess the circles analogy is a good way to put it. Yeah, each country's its own circle, and then they play within that circle, and then there are bigger circles where different teams from each of those circles can play each other.
So I know that in America, we have had a big problem with football and a lot of players who are getting hurt, having concussions. They are getting other more chronic diseases where you have brain degeneration from being pounded in the head multiple times, and that can impair your abilities the longer you're in the game or years later afterwards, since you retired. So is that something that other countries see with like soccer? You have people who are, I am a 7-year-old retired soccer player and I can't walk because I've kicked too many balls. Is that a thing or?
No, I don't think so. At least I'm not a professional soccer player, so I can't comment on that. But definitely not as like high profile in terms of like chronic injuries as you see with American sports, just because it's inherently more contact based. Things like traumatic brain injuries, it does happen in soccer, and they're becoming more like conscious about how like concussion protocols work, because growing up we never had anything like that. I'd never seen that before. It was kind of interesting when I first moved to America, seeing players being like evaluated on the field for head injuries in the way they were, in like a very systematic way. While with soccer it's more just like they'd be like, maybe he can, maybe he can't play. You rarely ever saw players, unless it was like a really bad injury, being like taken off for a head injury. But now I think because there have been more and more injuries, and I think also just how controversial it was in America, and that's being in the news, I think made people in other sports more conscious about head injuries.
So you think that it is a testament to how people are looking at the situation, not that it's becoming more of a problem, but the problem has always been there, but we're just now paying more attention to it?
I suppose it depends on the sport you're talking about. I think with like American football, it probably is like a real issue. You're seeing like a lot of older NFL players that seem like they're kind of struggling to talk sometimes. And again, it's just because they're getting hit in the head all the time. With soccer, it's like it might be clash of heads, some headers.
I mean, you guys are
like
hitting the ball with your head off, right? Like
that's actually an interesting thing. I think one of the American like soccer federations for like youth teams and stuff was saying they won't allow headers.
Really?
I saw something news somewhere, so this could be like completely fake or something.
Really?
But I never heard that when I was growing up. But just because you're repeatedly like getting hit in the head with the ball, I guess to avoid like head injuries. But the nature of the injuries with soccer, I think, at least for myself, and also just like watching actual like real players, like professional players play, it's more, I think, overuse injuries, specifically when it comes to like the hamstrings. You're seeing players that are more like speed focused. Hamstring issues like a big thing. I think it's just that's the muscle that for whatever reason gets the most tight. But not necessarily like high impact injuries so much. Just because tackles are becoming more and more regulated, and you can't really go in with like flying tackles that you might like break someone's legs or something.
Is that like a yellow card or red card? I don't know how the cards
it depends. If you go with your studs up,
wait, what does that mean?
That means like if you go, I don't know if it used to always be this way, but for me like growing up, if you go with like a sliding tackle, let's say it's your foot, like bottom of your foot, top of your foot, you normally want to use like the top of your foot to like almost scoop it out from there. But if you go flying in with like your, I guess, cleats up, you could say, like your studs up, going right in someone's shin or like that, and you hit them like that, you could really easily break their leg.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's one thing that soccer players get a bad reputation about, like diving or flopping a lot. And they do flop sometimes, but a lot of times they go down because it's like, if I take this hit, this guy's going to break my leg. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you know it's going to be a foul, like I'm going to go with the momentum. Like I'm not going to just let him like crash into my leg when I'm at full speed with like his leg flying in. I'm going to go down with the momentum of it. Just to protect myself.
Do you see a lot of like ACL, MCL, PCL? I mean, do you have ligaments around your knees, or do people have more kind of like tib fib breaks or femur breaks, or like?
Femur break is rare. I don't think I've ever seen a professional player get like a broken femur from a game.
It's a strong bone.
Tib fib, I guess, does happen sometimes, but rarely, because it has to be like a really bad, like high impact tackle. Ankle injuries is a big thing. But again, not so many broken bones more ligament injuries and muscle injuries. I think are the two main things. Well, it seems like I don't watch a ton of American sports, but I do try to follow like NFL and NBA. And I see like NFL, you might get some like crazy injury, especially like back injury or head injury. Because
American football started off with, we're going to see how much power we can to overcome the next team. Like, it didn't start off with, we're going to throw the ball and have receivers and have a quarterback that's going to pass and do 50, 60-yard gains. It was more of like an incremental, what's the biggest and the strongest guys we can get to kind of just push them down.
Yeah.
And there were deaths that were occurring, and it was a problem. So because of that, the game changed, and American sports in general, football has evolved over time. And there are new regulations that are coming in to kind of regulate what we can and can't do. But the problem with that is, because money is an incentive thing, if you do too much regulation or you try to change the game so much, then that will change the nature of how we see the game, but more importantly, how many people are viewing it. I know that there is a thing that was I just heard it, that baseball is becoming boring. Because
now becoming boring?
Okay, so a lot of people have a problem.
Someone woke up, I've been watching for 3 hours, like, wait, it's kind of boring.
Yeah, it never was really my sport, but a lot of people love it, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, that's because it's becoming more of I'm gonna strike you out, or you're gonna hit a home run. And there's less bunting or maybe 1 or 2 base increases between.
I'm getting too good almost.
Yeah, I mean, the pitchers are just they're pitching fast. And if you have fast pitchers, they're either going to hit the ball with a really great accuracy to give them a home run, or you're going to strike that person out. And there's not much play there. It's not much interplay like you would see where someone's like in a pickle and they're trying to get from one base to the next, or you have a fast play where you see the ball thrown around trying to get someone out, like the stuff you would see in the movies that are associated with baseball or an exciting game. Gotcha. And so when we have optimized the game so much to improve or regulate it in a way, people feel like that you remove the heart of the game. And I don't know if you've seen that in soccer or football, where people are really upset about over-regulating.
I'd say the over-regulating, not so much about the physical side. I mean, some people be like, oh, they don't let them tackle like used to all that stuff. But in general, I don't think the complaint's more about the physical limitations. Mm-hmm. It's more how like video reviewers come in. Okay. And I think that's redefining the way certain tackles are being interpreted, because a lot of times if you play something in slow motion and look at it 100 different angles, you're going to find something wrong.
Right.
It's almost like from a medical point of view, like they don't want to over-image things because they're like, we're going to find something that's just maybe an incidental finding that doesn't mean anything, but now we have to do something about it because it's there. And that's why they don't MRI everyone. Right, and I think that's the same thing's happening with soccer, and I'm almost on that side too now. And before I was like, yeah, we should do like video review. And then now I'm thinking, it's kind of ruining the momentum of the game, the flow of the game. It doesn't feel the way it does. Like goal celebrations aren't the same because you're like, oh, on guard, being, they're going to review this.
Injuries in soccer are just going to stay the same, get worse, get better? Like, what do you...
Probably get worse. I think the players are playing more and more games. Because it sounds like a lot I'm describing. They got the domestic league, they got international club tournaments, they got the international games for their nation. Yeah. And there's not really long breaks like there is perhaps like in American football. Yeah. Where, they play, obviously a very physically demanding sport, but it's like they play 17 games, just like 1 game a week. Or might be more now, and then obviously like occasional playoff games too. But then besides that, they're done. I mean, they're working out and stuff. There's more like recovery time.
How many games is that typically?
For soccer?
Like for you would have in a season through all of these.
There is the domestic league will be 38 games, and then the Champions League just depends on how far you get in, like how far you go. But then there's also the FA Cup, for example, in England. So there's cup tournaments too on top of that they play. Yeah. And there's typically the top teams might be in 4 different tournaments at a time. Okay. And then after that, in the summer, when the season's done, that's when you also play international games for your nation. So they don't really get a break. It might be for like a couple weeks, but top players might be playing like 60 or so games a year, which isn't like crazy high, but it's like the games are long and they have to cover a lot of distance. Yeah. and the recovery time is getting like less and less. And then when they are off, they typically play international friendly like exhibition games in other countries to like, I guess, raise the profile. So there'll be like friendly games in the US because Americans don't get to see these teams play. So they'll fly out to like the US or Australia or parts like Asia or Middle East. So the repetitive injuries, I guess, if you word it that way, those ones I think will get like way worse.
And those are just due to stress on the player and less because of the actual gameplay itself.
Yeah, I'd say not. I don't think the injuries from like impact from a tackle are getting worse, or they could be. I don't know the stats, but just as a viewer, that's not what I notice. It's more just players like suddenly pulling a hamstring while they're running, or just because they don't get a break, play like every 48 hours or something.
Didn't someone just like pass out recently?
He had a heart attack actually. Yeah, there was, but I think that was more. He probably had some type of condition, I imagine, because there are obviously these stories where athletes just suddenly have a heart attack. He's stable though right now, but Christian Eriksen for Denmark had a heart attack. I don't know if you've seen the footage or anything, but he basically just like collapses suddenly. And I think because there was no one around him, all the players knew, okay, something's like really wrong. This guy just like fell over.
Right, but he's like a top player, right? Like he shouldn't be. I mean, I don't know if they have like problems with comorbidities with like atherosclerosis or like hypertension or any of those. I mean, your heart should be super strong. You should be able
maybe too strong though, in a way, because you see, it was cyclists too. They got to be like careful about their hearts being like too efficient. The pulse rate or whatever gets too low sometimes.
But that would
an extreme example, but.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see like what precipitated his heart attack, because you could see that with like the typical population, particularly in America where it's so common. But if someone's like a high performing athlete, you should see that. I hardly ever see that, and I'm kind of curious as to like what are the incidental ways that can happen.
Yeah, I guess perhaps some like genetic myopathy or something you just didn't even like think about, because there have been players that like died. There's a guy called Sheikh Tiote. He had a heart attack and died.
Just playing a game?
Yeah, he played in China at this point, but he was famous for playing like Newcastle. But after, a lot of players move to China when they're kind of like older and they want to make a ton of money.
Because that's a great market?
Yeah, they pay a ton because because it's not a very prestigious league, but they want to raise their profile, so they're trying to recruit better players to their league. But if you don't have a prestigious league, the only thing that can really incentivize someone is money, you know what I mean? So
they're not really going to do well on these international games, but they would be in like maybe a club or maybe some of these smaller.
They don't really do too well on either. It's more, like these kids are playing soccer, they're dreaming of playing for Real Madrid, Barcelona. They're not dreaming of playing for like Shanghai.
I see.
Just to be like blunt.
Okay.
So, a lot of players might not be as fussed about the salary they might get at Barcelona because they're like, I don't care, I want to play for Barcelona. But if it's, they'll be like, well, you got to convince me to come move to Shanghai.
Okay.
So we give you a ton of money. But not too many players do that. It's more like older players that kind of achieved what they've wanted to achieve. And now they're like, okay, I need to.
It's kind of like.
My retirement fund now is in China. Yeah, they'll pay them insane amounts.
That's interesting. Do these people have a lot of injuries? Or
when they're in China?
Yeah.
Probably, maybe less so because they're older and they're probably more conscious of their body.
I see.
Because their recovery is like longer.
And what is older?
In soccer, kind of once you reach 30, you're like getting up there. 34, like, is when most players kind of retire. I mean, it varies, but after you turn 30 is when they're like, okay, this person's kind of like dwindling down in their career. Yeah.
Okay. Yo, I learned so much.
So yeah, I guess it wasn't too much about injuries, more just me rambling about the way soccer works. It's an interesting topic. People aren't familiar with it. Yeah,
I learned a lot about like the differences, particularly what we do in America, but like a different type of like sports system, and how it contributes to a lot of the health of the players. There's a lot to take into account, right? So that's interesting.
One thing I think would be cool to see in sports outside of the US, like particularly soccer, because you don't see this, are the medical tents.
Okay.
Which I think is pretty interesting, like how the NFL players are always like treated on the field.
Yeah.
But you don't really see that so much in soccer. I'd say they're more like the medical team might come in like on the field if the player's like down, check in on them, but then they just stretch them out and I guess take them to the hospital. I don't really know what happens after that, but I've never seen them, how they bring them in like the little Gatorade golf buggy or whatever, like wheel them on, then drive them to like the medical tent, and I'm guessing there's like a doctor or something in there where they like treat it, because they'll give them diagnosis like field side. Like the commentators be like, okay, he's coming in. He had a scan, and they're saying it's
the scans are always negative in America. Though, right?
okay.
They're like, oh, the MRI came back negative. Like, okay, of course it came back negative. We don't really know what they're telling us, right? So it's interesting to see like the difference that in America, the health of the player is particularly important.
Yeah.
But in NFL, which is different from basketball, if you get injured or you get hurt or something, your career is over.
Yeah.
Like there's no Chinese league for you to kind of go over, and this is it. This is your career, and you don't have the financial backing that you would if you like in basketball, where you have a better retirement system.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. So yeah, but I think that's a cool way to kind of break off because we could be here for a while.
Yeah.
But anyways, hopefully you guys like the conversation, and yeah, that's our discussion on soccer, sports, injuries, and
hope you guys learned something from that. Conversation was kind of over a lot of different random things, but hopefully you can get something from it.
All right. Anyways, please follow, like, and subscribe. And until next time, take care.
Cool.
That was crazy, man.